Trump is a different person in private as opposed to this buffoon clown that we see in public. He does focus in on people and he does ask questions. And he is much more, say, accommodating. He's not this abrasive personality that we see on the television. And Putin knows that based upon his previous meeting with Trump that took back when was it 2017, 2018. Trump at that time was under the cloud of Russiagate and accused of being a puppet of Putin. And now that it's been exposed, that was a Hillary Clinton plot carried out with the help of the CIA and the FBI. Trump's not as susceptible to being accused of that. There's still a few out there making that accusation, but it no longer carries weight. So Putin does know that Trump's a different person in private when all the cameras are off. So maybe he's counting that he can reach out to that Donald Trump and talk some sense. Putin believes that if he can simply talk face-to-face with Donald Trump, he might be able to persuade him to say, hey, look, do you really understand what's going on here? I want to make sure that you understand our position, where we, Russia, are coming from. I wouldn't be surprised if Putin makes that as one of his points to Trump, reminding him that says, we don't need to be enemies. We don't need to be at each other's throat because there was a time when we were collaborators in fighting a great evil. But he's going to make it clear, Russia's not the evil one here. There are areas, despite the antagonism of the United States towards Russia over the last 25 years, it's worth noting that I think it started in 2004 that Russia and the United States cooperated closely on a space program. And in fact, Russia was a critical component in that program and in enabling the United States to get back and forth from the space station. Without the Russians, the U.S. would have been just spectators watching. So there is, Putin may be hoping that he can build upon that kind of past cooperation. I did make the point that the date of the meeting is significant because August 15th is the date that the government of Japan surrendered in World War II. That marks the sort of official date of the ending of the war in the Pacific. And as Russia played a role in that, in fact, you could almost make the case that Truman's decision to drop the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki had more to do with trying to send a message to Russia to keep Russia from getting too much credit for the end of the war. But Russia had promised President Roosevelt at the Potsdam Conference or the Yalta Conference in February of 1945 that as soon as Russia had settled the war with Germany, it would turn its focus and come assist the United States in taking out Japan, which just a few days after the bombing of Hiroshima on August 6th, Russia invaded Manchuria and really caused a significant retreat of the Japanese. You can build a case that if Truman had not dropped the atomic weapon, that the war would have come to an end in any event with the help of Russia. But again, the animus towards Russia had already started then. It'd be one thing if the day that Witkoff's in Moscow talking, that Trump issued that executive order declaring Russia an enemy, a national security threat.
Yes.
Now, we can say, I didn't really mean it. What are you doing? Now, the Russians are watching all of this, and I think they now realize that they are considered an enemy, but Putin is trying to find a way to keep this from becoming a nuclear conflagration. The reason Trump is now pushing, remember his deadline was initially 50 days. Then it went down to 10 days or 12 days. And then this urgency to get Witkoff over there to beg Putin for a meeting. Why did he do that? He did that because the military situation on the ground is worsening much quicker for Ukraine than anyone anticipated. And this is, I call it, this is a revision of the Minsk II ploy or the Battle of Debaltsevo. Because back in February 2015, the militias in the Donbass with support from the Wagner group that was backed by Russia They were on the verge of defeating the Ukrainian army, and Angela Merkel and Francois Hollande, the leader of France, they rushed to Moscow and begged Putin, "No, stop! We'll sign an agreement, and this agreement will ensure the peace." And that was the beginning of Minsk too.
Right.
And then Merkel later admits it was just a ploy. It was a sham. We fooled those stupid Russians because we wanted to give Ukraine time to build up. That's what Trump's trying to pull off now. The West is not looking to live peacefully with Russia. That basically they want Russia to be subjugated. And the notion that, if we just get together and talk this out, we can all come to an understanding. Bullshit. Not going to happen. It all goes back to the West trying to portray this as a territorial dispute between Ukraine and Russia. And that it's just a matter about negotiating over terrain, over who controls what piece of land. That's not how Russia views it. For Russia, this is a confrontation with the West over NATO expansion. And the West, since 1995, has been relentlessly moving towards the East, attempting to surround Russia with NATO members, bringing in states. And they are continuing to do it, which we saw on Friday with the signed agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan that was brokered by the United States. And there are reports out that there was a secret part of the deal that both Azerbaijan and Armenia eventually are going to be offered to become members of NATO. They want to completely violate Russia, break it up, steal its resources, subjugate it. And I think Russia, the Russian leadership, even Vladimir Putin, appreciate that. So what's going on with respect to Ukraine is not about de facto or de jure, have a legal recognition that Crimea is part of Russia, that the Donbass, Luhansk, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson are part of Russia, that they are now part of Russia as far as Russia is concerned, legally, it's constitutionally. Again, Russia will not allow that. Those are pissant countries. They're tiny. Russia is not going to sit back and become a target of the United States and the West, who want just one thing. They want to, I've used the word before, it's a strong word, but it's rape. So it's not like the notion that Putin can come into these talks and go, okay, I'll trade you Zaporizhzhia for withdrawal of NATO force. No, that's not going to happen. And the people pushing that they're smoking dope. They're off in a land of fantasy. So there's a failure to communicate. To quote the scene from the Paul Newman movie, Cool Hand Luke. What we have here is a failure to communicate. Well, Russia is wanting to end the root causes. And that involves NATO, telling NATO basically to back the hell off. Stop coming at us. But the West seemingly is trying to be oblivious to the fact, this is just about Russia trying to rebuild the empire and conquer the world. The level of stupidity reflected in that is just shocking. If anybody approaches this thinking that there's something that Russia needs to do in order to make the West happy, to leave it alone. So Trump's playing games with this. Putin's going along with it, I think, I can understand some of the reasoning. It's nothing. I love using movie references. They provide a reminder of how this works, how these things work. In the movie Independence Day, which is about these aliens invading the Earth, and they had captured one alien, and the president of the United States went down, and he was this airheaded liberal that think all we got to do is just talk. And he's face to face through the glass between them with this alien and says, "What is it that you want?" And the alien's response, "That you die." Oh, you don't have our best interests at heart. But I think at some point, Russia's going to be confronted with a situation where it's going to have no choice but to retaliate. And because the West is not going to stop. I see no signs that the level of vitriol directed against Russia, all things Russian, and the demonization to portray Vladimir Putin as worse than Joseph Stalin is so ridiculous. And yet that's what's happening. There'd be somebody or one or two somebodies from the Department of Defense. So actually people with real expertise that understand the issues and that can then craft the appropriate language. And you'd get that from the Russian side as well. There have been reports of some meetings, but it's not clear that they've come up with anything. Now, if it turns out that there's been this secret negotiations underway and that they're going to sign an agreement, then I'll be surprised. But I do not envision, as the many in the United States do, that Russia is going to entertain anything involving a ceasefire without its conditions that it's set forth very clearly multiple times for more than a year are met. Those conditions specifically include the recognition that Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Crimea are part of Russia. They are constitutionally part of Russia. And so I have to assume that if this is coming from what the intelligence community is telling Cy Hirsch, they're telling Donald Trump the same thing. And that is, Trump and his team believe that this is a territorial dispute. This is an argument between Russia and Ukraine over territory. Russia just somehow needs the territory. That's not it at all, not even close. It has nothing to do with territory. That's not it. This is about NATO expansion to the east. And while Witkoff is in Moscow trying to cajole Putin into a meeting, and at the same time as that's happening, Trump is preparing to welcome the presidents of leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan to Washington, signing a deal. And the reports are within that deal, kept secret, is the intent to invite them and to make them members of NATO. The goal of surrounding Russia, the United States has not backed away from that. The United States is not interested in peaceful coexistence with Russia. And anybody that thinks that's the case has just not been paying attention to the U.S. actions. I don't judge the words, I judge the action on the particular personality of the president, because they were dealing with Bill Clinton, and then George W. Bush, then Barack Obama, then Trump, then Biden, and now Trump again. Different personalities, but it's always the same result. I think they realized that every request Russia has ever made to try to get the United States to stop expanding NATO or to let Russia come into NATO and be a part of the club, it's always been rebuffed, and they've continued the aggressive action. So I think there's just a hope, still hope, that somehow Trump will back off from this. But realistically, I would hope that people like Lavrov and Rybkov, actually Sergei Rybkov in particular, I think they have a much clearer vision that they'll talk to the United States, but they're not seeing any action. There are already submarines in position, just as Russia has submarines in position off our coast. This, again, it's Trump. Trump says things like this that, for informed people, makes him sound pretty stupid. So by the end of October, they could conceivably have completely broken the defensive line. This area that's in Western Donbass, or Western Donetsk, Kramatorsk, Slavkovsk. There are 3 or 4. This is like the last line of defense, or defensive emplacements that Ukraine has had in position. There's really nothing like it in other parts of Ukraine that are on the battlefront. Once Russia breaches that, and the initial thought was that they might take Pokrovsk by the end of September. It looks like they might take Pokrovsk by the end of next week. So it's accelerated dramatically. And that is why Trump rushed to have this meeting with Putin. They're trying to forestall Russia from breaking through and taking control of Ukraine, all of Ukraine, east of the Dnieper River. This meeting is going to take place on one of the U.S. military bases in Alaska. And so those don't have regular commercial air flights. So any plane that would be carrying Zelensky, number one, how's it going to get there? Russia's not going to let it fly across Russia. And you basically got 7 time zones to go through to get there from Ukraine. Or if he flies from Ukraine into Alaska, then you got a really long flight. But I don't think we don't have any more air defense systems to give them. The weapons that we're promising that we'll sell to Ukraine via the Europeans will buy it from us and then they'll give it to Ukraine. Some of those weapon systems won't be produced for 7 years.
Wow.
Trump's going at a time when the reality is the United States is weaker economically than at any time in his first or second term. And the part of why Trump has been using the tariffs and sanctions, Ukraine is in a way is a bit of a sideshow, because what he's really trying to do is disrupt BRICS, because the demand for dollars is dropping. And one of the reasons for that is these BRICS countries, which have significant economies, are shifting their purchases. They're not using dollars. Or in some cases, what you find is the Chinese are holding some dollars that they're using to fund projects in Africa, but that's not benefiting the United States. So from an economic standpoint, BRICS is the real threat to the United States. And that may be what preoccupies Trump, but he's not, as he told Zelensky, you don't have any Trump cards. Donald Trump doesn't have any cards either to play with Vladimir Putin. The Donald Trump that you talk to one-on-one or in person is a completely different character than the one that plays this character on television. And Putin knows that because Putin's met with him before in a more private setting. So Putin may be calculating that he might be able to talk some sense into Trump in order to prevent this from going where it's headed, which is going to be World War III. Number one, he doesn't have the legal authority to say, okay, we'll give you back Kherson and Zaporizhia in exchange for a ceasefire as long as Ukraine. He can't make that kind of deal. Those would be like Donald Trump sitting down with Putin and saying, okay, you know what, we're going to give you Alaska back. Trump doesn't have that power. He could say that, but it wouldn't actually make it happen. He couldn't return Alaska to Russia. But I think ultimately, as I anticipate this will play out, this will not be good for Donald Trump, because it will expose him again as weak and ineffective and not able to deliver on his much ballyhooed promise that he was going to end the war in 24 hours.